Hey, hey. Really the only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest, you mute them. Turning it up, these numbers are loud. Peeping this game from a nimbus is wild. Making it rain. While I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bill, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bill, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Hey. Really the only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest.
And welcome to the 2024 edition of Day One Free Agency. I'm Bradley Stalder here with Best Bell Fantasy on the Fantasy Football Plus network. That's right, it's Day One, almost in the books. If we get live breaking information, that's what we're going to report on. But for now, I'm going to go through some of the most fantasy relevant plays and takeaways and things that need to be on your radar, especially, at the beginning of your drafts. For sure, we're going to see some trickle down effects, but also later in the draft, some late round targets that you should be getting after here in your fantasy drafts. Once again, I'm Bradley Stalder. New Twitter handle needs to be updated, not FF Stalder anymore. It is at Djibouti Puns. I need to talk with my editors about getting this updated. Nevertheless, we're going to start with breaking news from last night, and that was quarterback Russell Wilson signs a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's right. Russ is going to be cooking in Pittsburgh. And looking at what Russ has done over the last few years, right, it's just not fit in Denver under Coach Nathaniel Hackett and then under Sean Payton. Last year, however, Russ was quarterback 12 in fantasy points per game. The year before, quarterback 18. It didn't feel like it, though, with only 16 passing touchdowns and 277 rush yards and 60.5% completion. Russ at quarterback 18 was a massive disappointment, but at quarterback 12 last year was a good value. So considering that Russell Wilson now goes to a team with, at least for now, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, and the two running backs, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, as weapons, we can see Russell Wilson still staying in that quarterback 12 to quarterback 15 range. I don't think he's going to get back to that 2015, 2014, 2017, where he was the top 3, number 1 type of quarterback, but we could see him still just stay in that quarterback 12, quarterback 15 range with Deontay, with George Pickens, and with the other weapons in tow. So all in all, Russell Wilson getting paid $38 million to not play for the Denver Broncos. Instead, he's going to be playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a great acquisition for the Steelers. Low cost. It will be surprising if he can't beat out Kenny Pickett for this starting position. So Russ right now is a player that is going extremely late in your underdog fantasy drafts. We're going to talk about some ADP value, and Russell Wilson offers that ADP value that we want to be just snatching up, right? A lot of quarterbacks, are being drafted in the 130s, 140s, etc. Right? We'll talk more about Kirk Cousins later on in the podcast, but we have to keep scrolling down. Russell Wilson is the quarterback 30. That's 30 in terms of ADP right now on Underdog Fantasy. An absolute value. We're getting into it's such an easy pathway for Russell Wilson, who has never finished worse than quarterback 18 in any season. And right now he's being drafted at quarterback 30. So certainly a good value. But the difference between quarterback 18 and quarterback 25 really isn't going to move the needle. And so we do need, Russell Wilson, who does have a pathway to outscore Trevor Lawrence at quarterback 15, Tua at quarterback 14. I think that is very much within the range of outcomes for Russell Wilson. I know it's outdoor. Russ does a lot better in the indoors, and he does a lot better in the semi domes right in Seattle. But I think with the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is definitely going to be an improvement in the offense. Arthur Smith was able to resurrect the career of Ryan Tannehill. And well, he was offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. So we do like Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. We just didn't like him as the coach. Mike Tomlin is also willing to bring in Russell Wilson. And I think that this is going to be a much better pairing than Sean Payton was with Russ in Denver. So Russ is a buy in a lot of formats. I don't think he's a first round pick in the super flex drafts, like your 112s or anything like that. But I think a mid to early second could probably get it done for Russell Wilson, who is on the wrong side of the age apex, frankly. He's 35 right now, and he's seen better days. But Drew Brees, his player profiler comp is Drew Brees, and Brees played almost into his 40s. So, we could see Russell Wilson very much get into fantasy relevance and maintain there and stay there, given the weapons, given the new location. And I don't think he's going to have much competition for the quarterback position. Russ should win that pretty easily. Okay. The next player that is fantasy relevant for us is going to be Michael Pittman. Pittman was going to be franchise tagged, but the rumors about Pittman during the offseason were much more positive than T. Higgins. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about T. Higgins because Higgins requested a trade, but we are going to talk about Michael Pittman, who was the second pick in the 2020 draft. And Pittman last year had a great season, set career highs in receiving yards, in receptions, and, fantasy points per game. He was wide receiver 14, 15.6 in full PPR, played 16 games, only missed one due to the concussion. So Pittman, I think the concerns are very clear. Anthony Richardson does the small sample size of Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman not meshing translated into day two. And I think that that's something that we need to consider, given that Michael Pittman is being drafted, at wide receiver 20 in the middle of the third round at 29.6 on Underdog Fantasy. So there's a lot of risk with Michael Pittman to be able to pay off this ADP, right? I mean, when we look at what Michael Pittman did last year with Gardner Minshew, now granted, Gardner Minshew, not Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman was wide receiver 22 in terms of best ball value rating. So right now he is slightly below, or his ADP is slightly above where he was last year with a quarterback who was able to get him career highs in targets and yards and receptions. So it depends on how the Indianapolis Colts attack this wide receiver 2 position with Michael Pittman. I do have concerns that Pittman is not going to be able to replicate and live up to that wide receiver 20 ADP, and especially because Michael Pittman was the wide receiver 36 in terms of rate of top 5 weeks last year. And we're talking best ball. Rate of top 5 weeks, he was a back end wide receiver 3. That won't get it done in terms of best ball, paying off for you, hitting those high upside weeks. And that's what you want from your players. You want them to be able to get you week winning weeks. And Michael Pittman did not show that last year, even with Gardner Minshew for the majority of the season. So with questions of chemistry with his quarterback, whether Anthony Richardson is going to get the pass volume enough for Michael Pittman is going to be a massive question. So we do have to be, concerned about Michael Pittman, his ADP. And even though he's extended into the next 3 years for the Indianapolis Colts, we should be worried about that ADP. I'm not buying Michael Pittman mid round 3 at this point, especially given that the Indianapolis Colts are still searching for a solid wide receiver 2. Alec Pierce is clearly not it. Josh Downs is not it. Downs mostly a slot player, and so Alec Pierce playing on outside, not a good player. So Michael Pittman and avoid even with the extension. All right, next player is Tony Pollard, running back now for the Tennessee Titans. Pollard agreed to a 3-year, $24 million deal with Tennessee. The Titans outbid the Cowboys, and reportedly the Vikings were in play for Tony Pollard's services. Yes, Pollard was disappointing, but I mean, he still had 252 carries, 55 receptions, over 1,300 total yards. His 6 touchdowns were disappointing, but his expected touchdowns were in the double digits. And he's at best when he's a committee back. And I think that's what Tennessee wants to do. They want to run an NFL-style offense where it's both Tazi Spears and Tony Pollard, and that could be a really dangerous group of 2 players with great breakaway run rates, great yards created, and players who have had production in the past. We saw last year Tazi Spears out-snapped Derrick Henry some games because he was just the better player at times. So pairing up with Tazi Spears, I think is going to be good for both of them, keeping them healthy. Tony Pollard clearly not able to carry a massive load, but neither is Tazi Spears. So we could see them each getting like 13 carries for 65 yards, and whoever falls in the end zone is going to get the touchdowns. And then you'll get some passes out of the backfield. This is a team that would be very interesting. And while it does nuke, the upside swings for both of these players. I mean, you are not paying premium prices for Tony Pollard. His ADP right now is running back 22 at 80th overall. Tazi Spears, running back 18 at 68th overall. You are not paying premium prices for these running backs. And so while the concern of, their ceiling is cut off, I mean, this is where you can draft both of them. This is the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery 2.0 scenario. Okay, maybe the offensive lines aren't as good. Maybe the offenses aren't as good. But this is where you want to be buy for both Tony Pollard and Tazi Spears. They're both talented players. The offense can't get much worse than it did last year. We've got new head coach, new offensive coordinator. We've got new running back in Tony Pollard, who has previous production and has hit ceiling weeks with 12 carries. So it just depends on how the passing game is going to be split up. And I'm very interested in buying both Tazi Spears and Tony Pollard after perceived dips. All right, we got some quarterback clarity as well from Kirk Cousins. Oh boy, talk about it hitting the nuts for Drake London, right? Kirk Cousins lands in Atlanta, $180 million contract, $100 million guaranteed over the course of 4 years. And Kirk Cousins stays in a dome. He gets to throw to Drake London. Right now, Drake London is drafted as the wide receiver 24. I expect that his ADP will rise into probably the wide receiver 18 to 20s. And then you've got Kyle Pitts as well, who is the tight end 9 right now. I could see him leapfrogging Evan Ingram and Brock Bowers. And if there's enough steam, getting into Dalton Kincaid and George Kittle territory. So Kirk Cousins last year, as I pull up the data, Kirk Cousins was the quarterback 9 in terms of best ball value rating. That was ahead of Brock Purdy, ahead of Jordan Love, and ahead of the very fantasy relevant Sam Howell. So Kirk Cousins now lands in Atlanta, where we have a lot more optimism about the offense. Bijan Robinson as well maintains his status as a first-round pick. Lots of dump offs. We've seen what Kirk Cousins was able to do with Dalvin Cook a couple years ago in Minnesota, and Bijan Robinson cements himself as a first-round pick in your fantasy drafts. For Underdog right now, Bijan is being drafted at the 7th or 8th overall spot. I could see him bump up a little bit given the now certainty at quarterback for Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. So I can see him moving up into, running back 2 territory pretty regularly. Brees Hall is right now the running back 2, but Bijan, I think, is going to creep up into Brees Hall, and I could see them be more interchangeable as we are moving forward. So that's how I'm attacking this. Kirk Cousins right now is being drafted as the quarterback 20. And the Atlanta offensive line is pretty strong. We expect it to hold up for Kirk Cousins coming off of the Achilles injury. So Kirk Cousins at quarterback 20 has pathway to become, more of that quarterback 12, quarterback 15. He would need extreme efficiency to get higher than that. And so looking at last year or the last couple of years, Kirk Cousins, quarterback 11 in 2021 or 2020, quarterback 12 in 2021, quarterback 11 2022, 19.3 fantasy points in 2023. So that's, he's pretty consistent with staying where he's at, and we want Kirk Cousins for our fantasy teams. He's going late enough, at the end of the end of the 12th round. We like Kirk Cousins, and he's going to be pretty easy to click with Drake London, Kyle Pitts. As we're strategizing, who am I going to stack? We can see Kirk Cousins move up just a little bit ahead of Matthew Stafford, and I think there might be enough steam to get him ahead of Jared Goff. We could see a couple round bump of Kirk Cousins in the best ball streets. All right. Running back DeAndre Swift is now moving to the Chicago Bears. 3-year deal, $24 million, drafted by the Detroit Lions, 35th overall, right? We remember last year when Swift was traded after the Jahmyr Gibbs selection in 2023, trade to the Eagles. And, Swift is a player that has historically been very good at outside runs. He's been very good at catching the ball. He's 25 years old, so he's right in the prime of crushing it. He finished as running back 24 last year in fantasy points per game. He's finished no worse than 12.5 fantasy points per game and set career highs last year in games played, rush attempts, rush yards. But then we saw, receptions go down because of Jalen Hurts, and we saw rushing total touchdowns go down because of Jalen Hurts. And now he goes to Chicago, where we anticipate Justin Fields is going to get traded. He has not yet been traded as of this recording in day one. However, DeAndre Swift is a player that I'm always a sucker for. He's got the profile, the pass catching profile that we want. And he has previous production. Swift last year, running back 27 in best ball value. And that was with the touchdowns, lack of touchdowns nuking his value. So in a backfield where Roshan has won a lot of the coaches over in terms of what does he bring to the locker room, it was clear that Roshan Johnson was not going to usurp or take over the backfield for the Chicago Bears. Khalil Herbert was good enough to hold him off. And then based on the amount of money that the Bears threw at DeAndre Swift, they said, you know what? We need to upgrade our running back position. This could mean Khalil Herbert, you're on the way out. Roshan Johnson, we like you, but we like you in special teams and we like you as a backup. And DeAndre Swift, able to carry the rock last year, 229 rush attempts, certainly not 300, but splitting carries with Roshan Johnson, keeping DeAndre Swift fresh, catching balls out of the backfield to Caleb Williams, who we anticipate to be drafted as number 1 overall. This Bears team could look a lot different than last year, not only because of that, but also because we anticipate Darnell Mooney will get signed somewhere else. So it's going to be DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, and Caleb Williams, probably another first-round wide receiver selected as well in the draft. So we are monitoring this situation as it goes forward. However, DeAndre Swift, a player that I am big on. I think this means Khalil Herbert probably gets cut or sent somewhere else, traded. And Deonta Foreman, who played valiantly last year, not on the radar anymore for fantasy unless he gets scooped up on a veteran minimum deal somewhere. Sweet. We'll keep her rolling with free agency news. Gabe Davis signs a 3-year, $39 million deal, $11 million guaranteed to Jacksonville. And Gabe Davis was one of those players that, man, he was tied to Josh Allen, and we always thought, oh, he could have a big game here and a big game there. But ultimately, Gabe Davis, he does have big games from time to time. Finishes wide receiver 30 in best ball value rating. Hold on, let me update this. He was not wide receiver 30. He was wide receiver 36 in best ball value rating. And so for a player who is a wide receiver 2 on a team, maybe a wide receiver 3, playing on the outside. So we've got Gabe Davis on the outside. We've got Christian Kirk in the slot. We've got Evan Ingram in the slot. It depends on what happens with Calvin Ridley. If Ridley does not re-sign with Jacksonville, and Jacksonville is still negotiating based on the latest rumors that I'm hearing, Calvin Ridley may return to the Jacksonville Jaguars. However, if he doesn't, Zay Jones will play on the outside. Gabe Davis will also play on the outside. I think that if the Jacksonville Jaguars miss on Calvin Ridley, they need to go after a T. Higgins type. They need to go after another alpha type. They cannot go into the season with Gabe Davis / Christian Kirk / Zay Jones as the number 1 wide receiver. Like, the wide receiver struggled last year to connect with Trevor Lawrence. At least give Lawrence another chance. And that's why I'm here pounding the table for Calvin Ridley to return to Jacksonville. But Gabe Davis is there, and I think would be a fine number 2. But this is the contingency plan for Jacksonville, whether or not they're able to re-sign Calvin Ridley. You know, it's been frustrating as a Gabe Davis manager over the course of the last few years. However, in best ball, you're not really having to pay a super premium for Gabe Davis, right? Gabe Davis right now, wide receiver 62, being drafted 100 in the back end of the 12th round, 139 overall. I think is a very, very easy click for the best ball upside players. He's going to have big plays. He's got a high ADOT. He's a downfield, big-bodied receiver with good enough speed. He just has like no burst and no agility. like he's not an athletic player relative to the other wide receivers. However, he does have speed and he's got a big body, and that counts for something, you know. So Gabe Davis is a player that we are buying at wide receiver 62. He can drop from what he did last year and still be very, very productive. So Gabe Davis, 3 years, $39 million to go to Jacksonville. And probably the stunner of free agency, Josh Jacobs goes to the Green Bay Packers on a 4-year, $48 million deal. Now, as a Packers fan, this doesn't make sense. The Packers are not known for going out and signing free agent running backs. Remember, Aaron Jones, drafted by the Packers. Emmanuel Wilson, drafted by the Packers. A.J. Dillon, drafted by the Packers. Our recent Amon Green, drafted by the Packers. You've got a lot of these guys drafted by the Packers at the running back position. Now you go out and you pay a significant amount of money to Josh Jacobs, 26 years old. But this is a player, first round draft capital, not good speed, not good burst, not good athleticism, a down year, only 13 games played, finished as the running back 18, his worst points per game finish of his career last year. And yet somehow Josh Jacobs gets more money. And perhaps the biggest deal of all the running backs. I mean, Saquon Barkley got 3 years, 37. But Josh Jacobs, 4 years for 48. Hats off to Josh Jacobs' agent, because holy buckets. Jacobs coming off 3.5 yards per carry. Nothing special. Like, the only thing special about Josh Jacobs last year was his opportunity share. He was running back 1 in opportunity share, but 63rd in true yards per carry, 50th in yards per touch. Geez, oh, Pete, it's so bad. His juke rate was 53rd. Breakaway run rate was 48th. This is gross. Yards created per touch was 49th. And the Raiders, the problem is he was getting so many guys in the box. I mean, sure, even Josh Jacobs was not able to do much with it. But on the Packers, is their offensive line that good that they're going to be able to make up for his inefficiency? I think Jacobs is just a little bit better version of A.J. Dillon, right? Give me Aaron Jones over Josh Jacobs in this Packers offense. Like, geez, oh, Pete. And according to sources right before this, the Packers convinced Aaron Jones to do some restructuring. So we're gonna monitor that and see what became the truth out of the Josh Jacobs scenario. However, we should not be super excited about Josh Jacobs' talent. We should be about his opportunity. So let's look at his underdog fantasy. He's being drafted 59th, 60th overall. So back end of the 5th round. I have a couple shares of Jacobs in 0 running back squads, but that's not good. Like, his landing spot, he may get some goal line work. We liked that for Aaron Jones, but is he what the Packers want in terms of like, if we're worried about Aaron Jones being injured, Josh Jacobs, looking back at even last year or over the last couple of years, 2019, 13 games, 2023, 13 games. Like, he has played 15 or more games in 3 of his 5 seasons, but now he's just at or past the age cliff. I've got major concerns. And so if he's already inefficient, if he stays healthy, he'll pay off that 5th round, 6th round ADP. But that's asking a lot from a running back who, has missed some games. And then you're willing to pivot off of Aaron Jones, who just, scored 3 touchdowns in your most recent win in the postseason. Like, man, oh man, it's tough. It's tough. Nevertheless, we look at Aaron Jones now, who is a free agent. There have been some rumblings about, is he going to go to the Vikings? Is he going to go here or there? And there's no word yet about Aaron Jones landing, but we do know that Aaron Jones is cut from the Green Bay Packers. So unfortunately, Jones is going to be finding a new home here shortly. As a Packers fan, hurts my heart, but Jones was super productive. I mean, we'll pull up the running back best ball value rating. Jones was running back 17 in terms of best ball value rating last year. That is inclusive of his big time spike week game against Dallas, but those are the types of games that you can anticipate from Jones. Jones had a better best ball value rating than Bijan Robinson, Kenneth Walker, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson last year. So Aaron Jones, and he was in line with Rashad White and David Montgomery. So on a per game basis, Aaron Jones delivered when he was on the field for you. Problem is, he plays the running back position. So Is he going to be healthy at age 29? I mean, he was looking pretty prime even against San Francisco 49ers, where he rushed for over 100 yards and was the first running back to do so all season. All right. Gardner Minshew, quarterback for now the Las Vegas Raiders. Wow. Minshew finished as quarterback 31 in best ball value rating. I mean, right in line with Aiden O'Connell last year. So nothing spectacular about Gardner Minshew. He was able to support Michael Pittman, and so I don't have a lot of concerns regarding Davante Adams. Adams right now is being drafted as wide receiver 13, and I'm fine with that if it's Gardner Minshew. We will see a limited ceiling from Gardner Minshew with regards to like the wide receiver one. There were games where Michael Pittman was just not able to get it done, but Davante Adams is a better player than Michael Pittman. And so, looking at what Gardner Minshew was able to do last year, he's clearly going to be in a competition with Aiden O'Connell. This also does not rule out Justin Fields going to the Las Vegas Raiders. But right now, Gardner Minshew is going off as the quarterback 50 on Underdog Fantasy in the last round. So if you want to throw a couple late round quarterback stabs at Gardner Minshew to try to stack with your Davante Adams, be my guest. I don't mind it. And Minshew has as good of a chance to win the job as a better chance than O'Connell. And I would say, depending upon what the Raiders do in the draft, if it's Penix, if it is Bo Nix, I think Gardner Minshew has a chance to beat them out, much more so than if the Raiders trade up into the top three. I don't think Minshew stands a chance against May or Williams or Jaden Daniels. So Gardner Minshew, at least a bridge quarterback, and we'll see what the Raiders are able to do in terms of the draft come the end of April. We've got some news that Antonio Gibson is now being signed to the New England Patriots, which is very interesting. Antonio Gibson was a darling out of the University of Memphis, and now almost 26 years old, third round pick, great speed, 4.39 speed, great speed score as well, 99th percentile. And so a player who has eclipsed, 240 receiving yards each season. He set career lows, though, in total touchdowns. He played 16 games, only rushed the ball 65 times. I do think that this is a breather back for Ramondre Stevenson, but I think one of the limiting factors for Ramondre was that he'll tend to get hurt. He's a big bruiser type of back, and so we want a guy who can carry the load as well. And we haven't seen the explosiveness from Antonio Gibson since his rookie season, but Gibson has history of production, being running back 16, running back 17 during his first two seasons, 2020 and 2021. But then, 2022 dealing with injuries. And then last year, Brian Robinson won the favor of Riverboat Ron and the rest of the offensive coaching staff. So while Gibson was not getting it done, on the ground, through the air, 48 receptions was a career high, 389 receiving yards as well, a career high. And it was interesting. Gibson was running back 6 in terms of fantasy points per opportunity, running back 7 in routes run, and running back 4 in yards per touch. He was not efficient on the ground, but through the air was very, very good. Second in yards created per touch, and 12th among all running backs in juke rate. So he's still got some juice and still trying to make guys miss. And so we're looking at a player who was 10th in receiving yards among running backs and only 22nd in target share. So we like that for Antonio Gibson. He fits that complementary role very well in New England. So we could see Ramondre and Antonio Gibson being deployed in the backfield. Ramondre probably getting 18 touches a game, but doesn't preclude Antonio Gibson 8 to 12 touches per game. And Gibson, running back 57 right now in Underdog Fantasy, extremely undervalued. Go get yourself some Antonio Gibson. And I also don't think this nukes Ramondre. Running back 19 is still pretty early, but 73.5. So we're talking the end of the 6th round, beginning of the 7th round for Ramondre Stevenson. I like him still at that value. I don't mind even with the addition of Antonio Gibson. I think we were assuming there was going to be a running back 2 anyways, but a player who can just step right on in and be a little bit more juicier than Ezekiel Elliott, right? Speaking of a player who is very juicy, and that's Zach Moss. We just got word a few moments ago that Zach Moss, running back 49 on Underdog Fantasy, 162nd overall, is going to the Cincinnati Bengals. And Moss was an absolute killer last year for the Colts when Jonathan Taylor was out. 183 rush attempts, almost 800 yards, almost 200 receiving yards, 7 total touchdowns, finishes the running back 28 in fantasy points per game. And Zach Moss, during the 2023 season, was the running back 23 in best ball value rating. That was better than Eckler, Pollard, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris. So Zach Moss now goes to the Cincinnati Bengals along with Chase Brown. And I don't mind Chase Brown still at, running back. Chase Brown, running back 32 is kind of expensive. Like, obviously, give me Zach Moss over Chase Brown at the ADP values. But if you can scoop up the Cincinnati backfield for running back 32 and running back 49, yeah, give me that all day for Zach Moss. So I love Zach Moss at that value. He certainly showed that he had some juice. He's running back 26 in rushing yards, 29th in yards per touch, 24th in route percentage, 26th in routes run. So, this is a player who produced, despite the fact that he doesn't have the measurables and the speed and the build. So I think that he's between the tackles, like thunder and lightning type of compliment. Chase Brown being the lightning, and Zach Moss bringing the thunder. Moss 5'9", 223, third round pick out of Utah. I like him at that value. And the Bengals had been willing to use Joe Mixon as a between the tackles grinder. And so, I'm not sure that they were willing to let Chase Brown be the full-time guy anyways. I like Zach Moss in this spot for the touchdown upside. Absolute banger of a pick. This also means that Joe Mixon is cut from the Cincinnati Bengals. We don't know where he is going to land, but Mixon had been very productive for the Bengals over the last 4 years in particular. Mixon has had his off-the-field issues from time to time, so maybe a team is a little hesitant to bring him in on that front. But the former second-round pick out of Oklahoma, 27 point, he'll be 28 years old when the season ends, coming off 4 yards a carry, 1,000 rushing yards, 376 receiving yards, and the second time that he had at least 12 touchdowns in a season, finishing as running back 11 in fantasy points per game. And Mixon finished last year's running back 13 in best ball value rating. So Mixon, will find out where he lands, but I think the opportunity share needs to be high for him, as Mixon has never really been an efficient running back, but he is reliable pass catching out of the backfield. And Mixon is a player that, well, had overstayed his welcome, I think, in Cincinnati. There were talks last season about Mixon getting cut. Now Mixon actually does get cut. Speaking of running backs, we're going to keep the running back parade going. Saquon Barkley signs with the Philadelphia Eagles. That is pretty wild. Yeah, pretty wild. Barkley, the running back 11 in best ball value, is one of the top opportunity share running backs last year. Not very efficient, but Barkley going as the running back 8 at the end of round 2, he's going to get steamed up a lot. There's going to be a big push for Saquon Barkley. Problem is, DeAndre Swift was still able to be running back 24 and get 1,000 rushing yards, but and the season before, Miles Sanders over 1,000 rushing yards. The problem is Saquon Barkley will get vultured at the goal line. Now we will need to see like a tush push. We'll need to see the tush push eradicated for Saquon Barkley to get some some love. But I think that Barkley creeps into the 15th to 17th overall. I don't think it's as he's not going to hang out in the back and then the second round anymore. He's going to get steamed up. It's going to be very interesting to be pairing, AJ Brown in round 1 with Saquon Barkley in round 2. We'll push Jalen Hurts to the back end of round 3, and then round 4 Devonta Smith, and then round 8, 9, wherever Dallas Goedert goes is going to be very, very interesting to get those players all stacked together if you're in the best ball streets. So Saquon Barkley, I think, still stays. I think running back 7, 8 is fine, but the pathway for him to get the receiving work to enter into like running back 4 or higher is going to be very difficult. And we saw DeAndre Swift not get the receiving work. We saw Miles Sanders for years not get the receiving work. So Saquon Barkley, I don't think is going to get the receiving work. And that's why we need to be a little bit more hesitant about investing, because my fear is that Saquon's going to get steamed up into round 1. And I don't think that's the pathway for Saquon Barkley to be fruitful for your best ball teams, because someone's got to take him, right? But the Saquon is on the wrong side of the age cliff. He's going to get vultured at the goal line. And so our concerns are, yes, like we love the offense. We think that rising tide lifts all boats, but I don't know how much Saquon Barkley himself brings, given his lack of efficiency over the last couple of years. He's coming off a couple major injuries in his career on the wrong side of the age cliff. So let's just be very, very careful about Saquon Barkley and his ADP being a value. I mean, last year he got an 80+% opportunity share. That's going to be hard to rival with the Philadelphia Eagles and how they want to deploy their offense. So Barkley, I think, is still fine, in that running back. If you want to get him into Jonathan Taylor area, fine. But taking him in round 1 is off the table still. And I think there's a cap ceiling, so let's be careful there. We do have an update about Aaron Jones. The Minnesota Vikings have shown significant interest in Aaron Jones. Per Diana Rossini, the Vikings are interested in Aaron Jones. So we'll see if Aaron Jones does, in fact, end up on the rival Minnesota Vikings, as we continue with free agency. We've got a few more running backs to tie in here, and that one of them is Devin Singletary, running back now for the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley leaves the New York Giants, goes to the Philadelphia Eagles. Singletary, on the other hand, finishing as running back 32 last year in best ball value rating, clearly overtaking Dameon Pierce. Singletary, again, a non-athletic, like former Buffalo Bill running back, not super athletic, just like Zach Moss, but a solid BMI, just like Zach Moss, but smaller, right? 5'7", 203, third round pick. And Singletary set career highs in rushing yards and finished as running back 36 in fantasy points per game. So a player who probably is going to still split the backfield. And I can see the Giants they signed Singletary, but then also take one of those late day 2, early day 3 running backs that they like to complement Devin Singletary. And Singletary, career high 216 rush attempts last season, never a super efficient running back. Last year, 32nd in true yards per carry, 39th in yards per touch, 44th in yards created per touch, just doesn't make a lot happen himself. And so for the New York Giants, they'll probably be looking to add another running back to complement Devin Singletary. But, Singletary is also a nice little value, running back 40 on Underdog Fantasy. I think he can pay that off pretty easily. Getting 200 carries and how many targets, like 30 receptions, that's totally replicable. Give him 12 carries a game, Devin Singletary, plus whatever you're giving a rookie that we anticipate can step in. I don't mind this. And Singletary is a nice little middle round running back, especially if you went pretty heavy in wide receiver, tight end, quarterback at the beginning of your underdog or best ball drafts. Singletary is a nice little target for you at the beginning of round 12. Well, what would be free agency for Jim Harbaugh if he didn't sign a running back? And that running back is Gus Edwards. Gus the Bus Edwards signed a 2-year deal with the Los Angeles Chargers, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens. Gus Edwards set career high in rushing yards last year, career high in rush attempts, career high in receptions and total touchdowns, finished as the running back 32 in fantasy points per game. And Gus Edwards also running back 29 in best ball value rating, in the same realm as Jerome Ford, Donta Foreman, D'Andre Swift, and Najee Harris. So Gus Edwards fitting in with Jim Harbaugh between the tackles grinder. It would not surprise me if Harbaugh adds another running back in the draft class. This is still paving the pathway for a Blake Corum landing spot for with Jim Harbaugh. So if if Corum is there in round 3, it would not surprise me if the Chargers select him there. It would be a true travesty if that did not happen. So Gus Edwards, 2-year deal, nothing crazy. I think, he's probably been forgotten about, as Edwards is being drafted as running back 56, 186th overall. A great little late round sprinkle, especially given the anticipation that Harbaugh and the LA Chargers are going to run the absolute snot out of the ball. And Gus Edwards, he doesn't need to be effective. He's just got to get some touchdowns, just like he got touchdowns last year in terms of, with the injuries. And he's always been like a solid complementary piece. Edwards has finished 4 of his 5 career seasons with at least 700 rushing yards, and 4 of his 5 seasons at 5 yards or more per carry. Obviously, in 2022, coming back from the ACL injury. So 2023, putting up career highs in rush attempts, yards, receptions, and total touchdowns. We like that for Gus Edwards, and we like the landing spot for the Chargers. A very nice late round selection if you're still doing the early best balls in the early best ball streets. Woo! The final signing for the night that I'm going to talk about And we didn't have any breaking news, but we did have some, rumors flying about offensive linemen, defensive players, etc. while I've been on the stream. But Austin Eckler signs with the Washington Commanders. And Austin Eckler signs a 2-year deal, not a lot of money. But we also have to remember Eckler was dealing with a pretty significant ankle injury throughout most of last season, which is why he was running very slow. And if we're going to cut slack to Tony Pollard, if we're going to cut slack to other running backs, like it's easy to not cut slack to Austin Eckler, who is an undrafted free agent and will be 29 years old when the season starts and disappointed us for fantasy last year, only finishing as the running back 21 in fantasy points per game and only finishing as the running back 24 in best ball value rating when he was pretty much locked to be a first-round pick. So Austin Eckler going to Washington, I think, is very interesting and can repurpose Brian Robinson to be a player that between the tackles fit pretty well with what they wanted to do. Brian Robinson's ADP is running back 26th, 88th overall. I think that's a little pricey now that the pass catching is taken out from Austin Eckler, but Austin Eckler is running back 23 at 82nd overall. I prefer Austin Eckler at ADP compared to Brian Robinson. Remember, Robinson was not drafted by this GM. He was not selected by this coach, Dan Quinn. And so I like Austin Eckler as a first day of free agency pick by the Commanders to just, in a short term turnaround, they can get rid of Brian Robinson if they want. They can get rid of Austin Eckler after the 2024 season. But Brian Robinson, running back 22 in terms of best ball value rating last year. And when we talk about like accessing elite ceilings, Brian Robinson, running back 25 in terms of that last year. Austin Eckler was running back 24 in rate of top 5 weeks. So Eckler, certainly a different skill set, pass catching weapon out of the backfield. And I think will be a nice little safety valve. We'll say that all offseason for probably Drake May or whatever quarterback ends up landing in Washington as the starter, the presumed rookie starter for the Commanders. Well, that will do it for tonight. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun checking it out. If you like the content and found it helpful, smash the subscribe button. Look forward to bringing you more great content here on the Fantasy Football Plus Network. This is the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Bradley Stalder. You can follow me on Twitter at Djibouti Puns. Until next time, good luck with day 2 of the NFL free agency.
I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bill, I'm the best till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bill, I'm the best till into the next world. Guess I got next still.